to hear all the circles buzzing. We'll just slowly wind down. We have a lot more time during the day to talk as circles. I just want to leave a few minutes before we go on a 15-minute break for any particular highlights, insights that came out of your circles. Anybody who wants to stand up and very briefly, a word or a phrase, share something that you discovered that you want to share with the entire group, and we'll just take a few minutes. There's a couple mics around the room, or you can come up here. I heard a lot of brilliance. I saw laughter, I heard tears.
We have a beautiful little girl that's part of our circle, and the thing that I have noticed is that this community has already begun to care for her, and I'm grateful for that.
Thank you. Others, highlights, insights, gems. Don't be shy.
I think it's impressive to me every time I come to Restorative Justice related about how open people are to share. That a lot of conferences you go to, if you ask the touchy-feely questions, people kind of recoil and don't want to open up. So I just want to thank everyone for being open to share, because I think that is it's very nice energy to be in a room full of people who are all here and willing to do that.
Yes, openness to sharing. This is how conferences should be, yes? Others? Thank you for passing the mic.
Hello, I just want to say I'm happy to be here, and at my table I have two young men who are our future, and I enjoyed hearing their stories and things that they're passing on and where they've come from. It's been really, and I just wanted to acknowledge them. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. We are intergenerational group here, which is really heartening.
Hi, thank you. I'll keep my response really short. Intergenerational and working together constantly aren't always the same thing. And even today at this circle where I know everybody one way or another, I discovered that we have a deeply different way of describing what love is. And that we have experienced different amounts of love through crisis at different times in different ways. And I hadn't realized that, even though I thought I knew them. And I think they thought they knew me. So I want to say that if we can focus on generations understanding that about each other, what love really is, and when it fails or is betrayed, maybe that's a root level understanding we need. And we can build on that. So thank you.
Thank you. Others? Yes, please.
At our table, we talked about how important our interpersonal experiences, and especially our family experiences, were so central to the work that we do, who we are, and who we are with our community, and something that I personally need to reflect more on.
Thank you. A few more before break. Anyone else? Yes, gentleman over here. Oh, sorry. Here and then here, sir.
I'll bring you the microphone. At our table, we had a few common themes, healing and connecting, but I think what really stood out to all of us was just how our stories really wove together, even though they came from very different places or experiences, or in some ways very similar places and experiences. But no matter what, we just kind of felt like we were picking up each other's stories as we passed the talking piece around.
Beautiful.
Yeah, hi. For me, it was a commonality in our group. I think it's reflective listening. I think, Rebecca, you alluded to this too. You know, candor and courage to share with people who are relatively total strangers to you in ways that we never do, even with the people that we know. So thank you all.
Yes. And speaking of courage, we can each take from this day many little activities and build our courage by going out and saying to somebody, can I listen to you for 3 minutes? All that can come out in 3 minutes. It's a real gift both ways. So thank you. And we are weaving a web here. That's what we're doing. We're weaving a web. We have each of us in our circle. I want to say you may feel very attached to your circle already. And after the break, you're welcome to come back to this particular circle, and or you're welcome to switch circles. So it's not rude. You might want to just expand. You might want to just think for a minute about how diverse is the circle you're sitting in, and all the diversities: ethnicity, age, politics, where we're from, what we've been through. We are all many, many levels of diversity. If you want to, after the break, come back and just switch it up a little, that's fine. So either way, you can be comfortable and stay right where you are. You can move around and make some more connections. So either way. And during the break, again, just meet as many people as you can, share emails, phones, connect, okay? Remember to go over and add something to the art table if you're interested. I'm going to be outside doing some qigong, some really simple movements, if anybody wants to join me. And any other announcements before break? 10-minute break? Longer break. So nice long break, and we'll see you at 11:30.
Hello, everyone. If you could please take your seats because the next panel is starting in a few minutes. If everyone could find a seat and your friends.
Restless weaver, ever spinning threads of justice and shalom, dreaming patterns of creation where all creatures find a home, gathering up life's varied fibers, every texture, every hue. Grant us your creative vision, with us weave our world anew. Good morning and welcome again to this wonderful day of communities of care wherever we are. I'm Reverend Susan Chorley, and I am the now Senior Program Director at the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry in Roxbury, and also which also has Renewal House, which is a domestic violence shelter and program in the Mission Hill neighborhood. So for the next hour and a half, we're going to be spending some time thinking about practice, the practice of using restorative justice in the particular areas that you and we exist within. And we have two panels that will be sharing about their experience of using restorative justice in their contexts. And on my way here this morning, the thought that just kept coming to me about 4 years ago when I realized I was in an abusive relationship and needed to leave, I felt very alone. And one of the reasons that I felt alone was that there wasn't a whole room full of people like this that were thinking and working and passionate about how can we do alternative, how can we approach crime or harm in an alternative way. So one thing I wanted you to do, or I wanted to do this morning, and I invite you to do it too, is to turn to someone at your table and to say, "You are no longer alone," and then have them say that back to you. Thank you. You're saying other things too. I love it. So we start singing. We are excited to share with you various practices of restorative justice, and excited to get you engaged in continuing the circle process that you had this morning at the tables, sharing sort of reflections on what you hear and how you feel you're being moved or transformed in your own situationality, and how you hope to allow this to transform the work that you're doing and transform the relationships that you have with others. So we have a lot of people that we want to highlight today and to share. And so what my task is to kind of keep us moving. And so I am going to introduce the panelists, and then each one of them will have about 5 minutes to share. And after this set of panelists, we'll have time to have conversations in the circles at your table, and then we'll have, magically, these individuals will disappear, and new individuals will appear up here, and then we'll have a second panel, which again will be followed by some time to interact with one another at the tables. We really believe and felt committed to the idea that though many of us know a lot about restorative justice in our particular context, that the knowledge and wisdom is really in each and every one of you, and that's the reason why you're here and why we're happy to no longer be alone in doing this work. So I will turn it over first to Pierre, who I know you met earlier. Pierre is a Harvard Divinity School student, obviously an amazing social justice advocate and activist, and has been serving at Renewal House for the last 2 years, and currently in the role of restorative justice advocate. And Pierre is really just going to highlight for us, we felt like it was important to talk about kind of basics around what restorative justice looks like, what it is, what are the principles, how it works. So Pierre's going to do that for us, and then we'll hear from the panelists and their experience of using restorative justice in their particular contexts.
Thank you, Susan. Well, I don't know why I'm here, since we all have experienced restorative justice practices already throughout the day. And as you know, restorative justice is about circles, and restorative justice is about forming communities. And the purpose, I believe, of this conference, of this summit, really is to leave here forming or having formed stronger communities. So that's really the goal, and we hope that the conversations are facilitating that process. I think about restorative justice, one has to think of traditional models of justice and models of retribution, punitive justice, or redistribution. What resources are being deployed when we talk about justice? And restorative justice, in a way, is answering to traditional models and saying the traditional model truly excludes many individuals. If we think of punitive or retributive justice, as we have in our current criminal justice system, what happens is the answer to questions is we lock people and we separate them. We separate the harm for community. What that does to individuals is deprive them of their full humanity and put them in a category of offender. When in reality, as we heard earlier today from our peers and at our tables, individuals are much more multifaceted than that. So how do we deploy justice? How do we hold people accountable while at the same time recognizing that there is more to their stories and more backdrop to their harms? I think that is at the core of restorative justice. I was asked also to give a workshop on restorative justice 101, if you will, everything you wanted to know about circles. And I'll tell you a little bit about the structure of that if you're interested, in case this is your first exposure to restorative justice. In that workshop, we'll have a conversation, we'll engage in a conversation about who has access and who deploys justice and the kinds of justice that there are. We'll also gather a general overview of restorative justice as grounded in international human rights domain, as well as we will obtain, if you will, I hope, a closer look at the ritualistic dimensions of restorative justice. Did I go over time? Is that what you're kicking me? No. I love you too. I'm just kidding. And we will also cover the idea that justice is, as you saw, has a joking aspect and humor, and we often think of justice as monolithic and serious, and that's not the case at all. We'll also cover the basics of circle process and different principles of short circle, of circle, and we'll hopefully participate a little longer in circle. Some questions that we'll explore in that workshop are the following. Can restorative justice incorporate a punitive and retributive model? Is that part of restorative justice? Number 2, how does restorative justice allow for meaning to be rediscovered, recreated, and reinvented in our lives? And how do we run circles? How do they form community? I hope I'm under time. Yeah, great, thank you.
So our next panelist, also I think you heard from this morning, is Strong Oak. She has actually, I didn't say earlier that Strong Oak, Janet, Pierre, and myself planned this section of the gathering today. So you can either be excited about that or give us feedback about that, depending on how your your experience of it is. But Strong Oak has been working in the field of restorative justice, domestic violence, and sexual assault for many years. She lives in Western Massachusetts and works at the, I'm sorry, I'm not going to call it correctly, at the New England Learning Center for Women in Transition. I'm so sorry, I didn't write that down. I was going to say Nelquit, but that wouldn't mean a lot to all of you out there. So Strong Oak is going to share a little bit more about the work that she does at Nelquit, but also about the workshop that's going to happen after this panel today about how do we incorporate restorative justice practices into thinking about the environment and our connectedness to one another and to all living beings.
Thank you, Susan. The work that when you're Indigenous and every place you go, it's all a circle. We're developing a curriculum now called Walking in Balance, Living According to the Original Instructions. This includes, the winged ones, the, two-leggeds, which are us, the four-leggeds, the animals, and the creatures of the waters, the creepy crawlies, that we're related and no better than any of these. And so our day, we live according to a medicine wheel, and in that wheel we believe that every single person has a special thing that they brought. Whether you're transgendered or birdash as we call it, or whether you're a two-spirit, heterosexual, whatever, there is room for you in the circle. We have no words for things like mental illness or stuff like that. There are no such definition, and there's no such thing as the wilderness either. In fact, when we talk about community commitments, in my community, you have to make a compact with the plants. The plants have their own consciousness. They do not go with our agenda. It's not in their best interest to be all eaten up, which is probably why some of us have allergies. But we knew this when we were more nomadic, and a problem came in when we decided to all live in one place, and we weren't moving around anymore. Think about this. If you had to move, you would have to get acquainted with a whole new set of plants. You would have to have a relationship with them. I'm talking about deep relationship, where you actually have to talk or dream or be with the animals in a way that I don't think in the dominant culture there is that consciousness. Well, this work invites that consciousness. Like even if a butterfly fluttered its wings, it changes like the wind pattern in the world. I think other cultures and spiritual practices have said that. One of the things that's different is we put spirit in everything. And we don't mean like religion per se, but spirit lives in all things. So we honor the emotional, the mind, the body, and the spirit. So when we meet, my group meets, we sage to purify ourselves. We acknowledge we're coming to the circle with a good heart, and that we don't have an agenda, that we're not willing to listen to other people. Then when we make that agreement with each other, then we have a talking stick that has an eagle feather on it. The talking stick itself was made in a very sacred way. It was thought about what its use would be. We went out and and sort of like dream, and then it's been painted and whatever, and then it becomes part of everyone's energy, and it has it brings like the universal consciousness is represented in that talking piece, and it goes around and it says to speak the truth, to be honest, and that's very hard to do. To speak honestly without fear of rejection, fear of losing job, fear of losing means to support yourself in the culture we live in. Very hard to be honest. But when you're with the stick, it's like you can fool me or you could deceive me, but you don't fool spirit, the one that's behind this whole thing, which we don't pretend to know. So it's important to be honest for yourself and for your community. And in regards to like how we would deal with infractions or people who harm others, we would see that as an imbalance, and that both parties would need some kind of healing, and that it would be based on justice and growth for both parties, and driven by the needs of the person who was harmed, would have to agree to what was decided. So this whole restorative justice thing is exciting to me, that it's coming out into the dominant cultural world, because I really think it's the humanity that we need to embrace. And so, there's way more to this, but I hope I've given a good flavor to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Strong Oak. Next, I'm thrilled to introduce you to Janet Connors. Janet has been teaching restorative justice principles and living out a restorative justice life for many, many years. And she is here actually with 2 students from the Diploma Plus program at Charlestown High School that I'll introduce in a moment. But excited to welcome Janet here, and just also thankful to Janet for her witness and for her commitment to this work, and really out of her own personal experience and desire for the world to be a different place. So, Janet.
Thank you, Susan. I'm not going to speak to schools because I'm going to let Paul and Sedone do that. So I'm going to speak about using restorative practices in community. And I first learned about restorative justice in the 70s when I worked with a group called Families and Friends of Prisoners. It kind of went on a back burner to me when I felt like the system was too entrenched. We weren't going to be able to cut through all this stuff. In 2001, my 19-year-old son was murdered. And from the outcomes of the criminal justice system in the trials, where 3 young men went to prison and the actual murderer, or person who murdered, because we are different in our being than in our actions, was acquitted. He beat his case. So I felt like I had to make my own justice, and I've met with 2 of those young men. And they are both out now. One's been out for 2 years, one's been out for 4. And I asked them to make commitments to lead their lives in different ways, and they are doing that. And then I also, if you believe everything happens for a purpose, I struggled with, well, what can be the purpose of having your child murdered? And so using restorative practices has been the closest I have been able to come to reconcile that. And I believe that every person has a value to our community. And I began to realize that there's so many issues of justice and injustice that happens in community that we don't have to worry about infiltrating systems. Right now, we can be on a parallel course with it. I shouldn't say we don't have to worry about it, but we can be on a parallel course with it. And as we build strength in community through circles and restorative practices, then community can stand together to change those systems. Some of the ways that I have used circles are in an example in a youth organization where a staff person and a young man, a female staff person and a young man were in a driveway at Roxbury Youth Works in the old building with a long driveway, fooling around. They were fooling around. 2 plainclothes detectives came in and slammed the young person against the wall, told her to shut the F up, all kinds of stuff like that. So We were not able to bring that policeman to the circle, but we were able to hold a circle for that young man to validate his experience. And so restoring things and bringing things back into balance does not always mean things are going to get back to where they were. Does not always mean that we bring in harmed parties and the parties who harm together. But it is that in the larger sense of community that we are helping people to restore a balance, to validate their own experiences. I also work, I do a lot of trauma healing, particularly with survivors of homicide victims, but not exclusive to. And so we hold circles with young people and with families, healing circles, circles that explore the human nature of wanting revenge, the difference between having those feelings and acting on those feelings. And I do that work with Mothers for Justice and Equality and through another organization called Legacy Lives On, as well as through the Homicide Support Services Program. We sometimes use circles just as peace building. So the Lewis Brown Peace Institute has 7 principles of peace: love, unity, faith, hope, courage, justice, and forgiveness. So we oftentimes will go and do a series of 7 circles, exploring each of those principles that are weak. Okay. Time's up. I have a whole lot more to say, but another time.
Sorry. Thanks, Janet. So as I mentioned earlier, we have 2 students from the Diploma Plus program at Charlestown High School. Sedone Petchan, is that right? Did I say it right? Petchan? Okay, awesome. And Paul Holmes. And thank you both for being here. And I'm excited to hear from you what your experience has been with integrating restorative justice principles in your school or in your community. So you can choose who you want to go first and take it away.
Could I ask what the question is kind of again? Can you kind of simplify it?
Sure. If you want to talk about what the benefit has been of using restorative justice principles in your school or in your community. Or just how it works, anything about how it's worked for you.
It's worked for me because it's definitely changed how I think. I mean, I always think outside the box, but I mean, that's kind of the reason why I'm in restorative justice, because I have different ways of seeing things. So I tell a little story when I got into Diploma Plus. Got to Diploma Plus. First year wasn't that great. The second year, they gave me this little blue paper, and it said, "You're invited for restorative justice," and I took it up immediately. I was like, anything that can help me out with with getting when you go to college and all that, it's cool to see on your resume that you have that kind of stuff. So you're like, yeah, that's something that's gonna be on my paper. Ooh. So I took it up, and at first I wasn't too into it. I won't lie, I wasn't too into it. I was like, this is kind of it's boring, It was slow. It was start off really slow. And I mean, it was kind of the first year that it was really a thing. We've always had, the Diploma Plus always had circles, but it was never, I don't think we ever had restorative justice. I don't think we had, restorative justice, yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. So, so I don't know what I'm saying now. So I took it up. Well, it affects the DB community because kids notice that there's always someone there to see what you're doing. Besides the teachers, there's always a student there for you, saying, "Hey, you're on track or you're off track or whatever." And when you mess up just a little bit, you gotta know that we're watching you. Restorative Justice is watching you, and if you need that little help, we can push you up, But I don't really know what to say from there. Restorative Justice has helped me become a better person, and as I said in the smaller circles that we had, it's helping me become a man. It's definitely something that it's slowly coming in, but I'm noticing that I'm more into everything. It's this year, my 3rd year, is finally getting out of high school. But I realized that there's so much to do, And this weekend I could have been like, oh, I'm tired, I want to stay home. But I came out and I said, yeah, this is what I want to do because I made this agreement to, do this. And as you grow up, I feel like you just get more responsibilities and you realize that your responsibilities are like really key to being successful. And Restorative Justice has helped me become successful, like big time. Like I'm totally into everything I do now. Yeah. Time's up.
Such a sneaky way that we do this. So thank you. So yeah, if you could share about your experience as well, and if you wouldn't mind also just sharing sort of how it actually works in your school.
All right. Like in DP, we have this thing, like before it was in here, it was like, how everybody was like, okay, you get a suspension hearing. Oh, most likely you got a suspension hearing. Everybody knows, okay, there's no like talking it out. You're just gonna get suspended. Like you're supposed to have a talk and then you're supposed to have your own word for it. But it's like, we all know that once you get it, you get suspended. So having restorative justice in it, it's like everybody actually has a fair like word. Like you really have a chance to like make things right. Not just like, when you get suspended, you get nothing from it really. They send you home, you come back, you probably be more mad, and then you probably do it over. With restorative justice, it's like they find out like exactly what happened. It's not just, okay, the teacher is right or whoever like is superior to you was right. They find like even ways to make it out so you don't get suspended. You learn from your mistake. It's not that, okay, I'm in trouble, I'm just gonna take my punishment and then I come back. No, they're gonna make sure that you learn from what you did and then you don't do it again. And if you end up doing it again, what way can you like go from it differently so you don't get more and more trouble? It's like a really structured way of basically like helping you learn from your mistakes, honestly. Also, it's like, just because, like, that's another thing about it too. It's like everybody has a fair word. Like, you get like, the way it's structured, they tell about you, and then it's like everybody would be different. So it's not like, okay, this is another kid getting suspended or this kid's been doing that. It's like, okay, you go in there, they're gonna talk about your strength, what you need to work on, what had happened, and you'll have like people supporting you. So it's not like everybody's on your case, like nobody's just jumping right on top of you like, okay, you did this wrong, why are you doing this, why are you doing that? It's like, it's a real good way to actually help others like fix like what they should not do, and if they get to that point, how can they change it? I joined it because this is like my 4th year, I'm a senior, and I've seen that happen too much, like people getting suspended for little things, and then when they come back, they're twice as mad because it was something that was little as like, oh, this kid left the class for 2 seconds, oh, he's getting suspended. Instead of like actually talking to him and making sure you don't do it, they just write him a suspension hearing and then they send him home. You're not like, sending someone home is not better because it's like, now you're just gonna leave them in the streets for like 2-3 days. So it's like, they're not learning from anything really. And like, school's supposed to like benefit someone to actually becoming more responsible for themselves and like holding like their, accountable for their actions. So you wanna,
You can finish your sentence.
yeah, time's up.
No, I want So we'll have a chance to interact with all of the panelists at the end of both panels, but now we'd like to encourage you to again go into circles at your table. And the question I thought that you could start with is actually, what is one of the highlights from what you just heard, or what is something you learned from hearing from any of these panelists and how it affects you in your particular practice or location? So a highlight or something you learned and affects you where you're situated. And we have about 15 minutes. Thank you. So